Welcome back to Kismet Romance Publishing. If you're just finding us now, you stumbled onto part 2 of a story that's already changed everything. Here's what you missed. Arya Blackwood was rejected by her alpha mate when forbidden power awakened inside her, cast out, hunted through a blizzard, left to die, but she fell into the territory of Theron, the last Alpha King, who revealed the truth. She's Moonborn, a bloodline the pack spent centuries trying to destroy. He trained her, protected her, until other alphas came demanding her death or his surrender. She chose neither. She walked away, alone, free, unbroken. If you need the full story, the rejection, the awakening, the moment she refused to kneel, the link is in the description below, or click the pop-up. It's worth it, trust me. And if you're here because you know what it feels like to be called too much, too dangerous, too powerful, subscribe. Not for me, for you. Because you deserve a space where being too much is exactly enough. Where your story matters. Where you're not alone. We're building something here. A community of wolves who refuse to be small. Now, let's find out what happens when the child of the flame stops running and starts hunting. Part 2 begins now. Part 2. The Moonborn Rises. Chapter 6. Deepening Connection. The journey north took 7 days. 7 days of Kyle leading Arya through territories she'd never known existed. Through forests so old the trees remembered when shifters were still fully human. Across rivers that ran silver under moonlight, their waters singing in frequencies that made her wolf keen with recognition. Past abandoned settlements where pack wolves had once lived before something, Kale never said what, had driven them away. They traveled at night mostly. Safer that way, Kale explained. Fewer pack patrols. Fewer questions about a lone wolf traveling with something that wasn't quite wolf, wasn't quite anything the packs had words for. Arya didn't ask what Kyle was. Had learned by the 3rd day that some questions wouldn't be answered until she was ready to understand the answers. Instead, she trained. Every stop, every rest, Kale pushed her to control the power that still surged unpredictably through her veins, taught her to channel it into her senses, her speed, her strength, showed her how to pull on lunar magic without letting it pull back. Power is a conversation, he'd said on the 4th night, watching her struggle to shift without the silver fire erupting from her skin. Not a command. You don't force it. You negotiate. You ask it nicely to do what you need, and if you've built the right relationship, it cooperates. And if I haven't built the right relationship, then it burns you alive from the inside out and laughs while doing it. He'd smiled at her expression. Magic has a sense of humor. Cruel one, but humor nonetheless. By the 7th day, she could shift without setting the forest on fire, could run for hours without her power trying to explode outward, could even pull on small amounts of lunar magic deliberately, enough to enhance her senses, to feel the moon's position without seeing the sky. Progress. Slow, painful, exhausting progress, but progress nonetheless. They reached the northern sanctuary on the night of the blood moon. Arya felt it before she saw it, a shift in the air pressure, a thinning of the barrier between the physical world and something older. The forest around them changed, trees growing larger, more twisted, their bark covered in the same glowing runes she'd seen in Theron's mountain. "We're close," Kale said unnecessarily. The power radiating from ahead was unmistakable. They crested a ridge, and Arya's breath caught. The sanctuary wasn't a building or a cave. It was a valley, impossibly lush despite the northern latitude, ringed by mountains that seemed to touch the sky. And at its center, a structure that looked grown rather than built, living wood and stone intertwined, forming walls and archways and spaces that pulsed with ancient magic. But it was the moon that made her freeze, hanging low over the valley, enormous and red as fresh blood. A blood moon, Kale had called it. Rare, powerful. the kind of lunar event that happened maybe once or twice in a shifter's lifetime, and it was calling to her, not metaphorically, actually calling. She could hear it, a voice that was female and ancient and vast beyond comprehension, whispering her name in a language that predated words. "Don't answer yet," Kale said sharply, his hand on her arm grounding her. "Not until you're inside the wards. The blood moon amplifies everything. Your power, your instincts, your connection to the source. If you open yourself to it out here, without protection, it'll flood you. Might not kill you, but you'll wish it had." She forced herself to look away from the moon, to focus on the path descending into the valley. "Is anyone else here? Other Moonborn?" "No, you're the first to reach this place in 43 years. Something sad crossed Kale's face. "The last one who made it this far was the wolf I told you about, the one Theron loved, the one he couldn't save, the one who'd made him promise. The promise he was keeping by helping Arya now." "What was her name?" "Lysa." Kale started down the path, and Arya followed. She was fierce, powerful, everything a Moonborn should be, and she was kind, which made her dangerous in ways the packs couldn't tolerate. They hunted her for 3 years before they finally cornered her. Theron fought his way through half a dozen packs to reach her, but... He stopped, swallowed hard. He was too late. She'd been fatally wounded, died in his arms, making him promise that if he ever found another Moonborn, he'd protect them better than he protected her. The grief in Kale's voice was old but unhealed. You loved her too. Everyone who knew her loved her. That was the problem. She made you want to be better, want to build a world worthy of what she represented, and the packs couldn't allow that, couldn't allow a Moonborn to inspire that kind of loyalty, so they killed her and called it justice. They walked in silence after that, the weight of Lysa's story hanging between them. Arya wondered if Theron saw echoes of her in Arya, if that's why he'd been so afraid, not just of what she might become, but of losing another Moonborn he'd tried to protect. The wards hit her the moment they crossed into the valley proper. Not painful, but intense. A pressure against her skin like walking through a waterfall of pure magic. Her wolf rose instinctively, testing the barrier, and was met with a response that felt almost like recognition. "Welcome, daughter. You've been gone too long." "The wards are sentient." Arya's voice came out shaky. "The wards are old." Kale led her toward the living structure at the valley's center, built by the first Moonborn when they realized the packs were going to hunt them to extinction. Keyed to recognize true bloodline. If you weren't Moonborn, you'd never have made it through, would have just seen empty forest and felt a strong compulsion to go literally anywhere else. Inside, the structure was even more impossible. Rooms that seemed to shift and change based on need, furniture grown from living wood. A central chamber with a ceiling open to the sky where the blood moon shone down in crimson brilliance, and standing in that central chamber, backlit by moonlight, was Theron. Arya stopped dead, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. He looked different here, wilder, his eyes pure gold, his power unconstrained by the political necessity of appearing civilized. This was Theron as he'd been before the packs, a creature of moon and magic and barely controlled violence. "You followed us." She found her voice, though it came out rougher than intended. "I followed you." His gaze was fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin heat. "Kyle, I trusted to get here on his own. The Conclave can function without me for a few days. I made it clear I was pursuing a potential threat to ensure she didn't cause problems for pack territories." His mouth twisted. They were satisfied with that explanation, especially the ones who hope you'll do something stupid so they have an excuse to mobilize. "I'm not going to do something stupid." No, you're going to do something brave and reckless and absolutely terrifying, and I'm going to be here to make sure it doesn't kill you." He moved closer, each step deliberate. "Do you have any idea what tonight is? What the blood moon means?" Kale said it amplifies everything. It does more than amplify. It connects. Every Moonborn who's ever lived, every drop of lunar magic that's ever existed, it's all accessible during a blood moon. But that kind of power, that kind of connection, it's overwhelming. Most Moonborn who try to channel it during their first blood moon either burn out completely or lose themselves in the magic and never come back. So what am I supposed to do? Ignore it? Pretend I can't feel it calling? No. Theron was close now, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, could see the way his wolf was pressed right against the surface, drawn to hers. You're supposed to open yourself to it, let it flood you, and trust that I'll pull you back before you're lost completely. The words settled over her like a challenge. Trust. That's what this came down to. Whether she could trust him to anchor her while she touched power that could reshape her completely. Whether he could trust her to come back instead of becoming something that would force him to keep his promise to Lissa in the worst possible way. "Why did you really come?" She held his gaze, refused to let him hide behind justifications about threats and territories. The truth, Theron, not the political answer. He was quiet for a long moment, the silence broken only by the sound of Coil discreetly leaving them alone in the chamber. When Theron finally spoke, his voice was low, raw with emotion he wasn't bothering to hide anymore. "Because I watched Lissa die, watched her bleed out in my arms while I was powerless to save her, and I swore I'd never feel that helpless again, never watch another Moonborn face their awakening alone." He reached out slowly, his hand cupping her face with devastating gentleness. "And because somewhere between pulling you out of that blizzard and watching you walk away from the conclave, you stopped being a promise I had to keep and started being someone I couldn't stand the thought of losing." The confession hit her like a physical force. This wasn't political protection, wasn't duty or honor or ancient promises. This was personal, raw, real in a way that terrified and thrilled her simultaneously. "I'm not her," Arya said quietly. "I'm not Lessa. I can't be what she was to you." "I don't want you to be." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, the touch achingly tender. "Lissa was. She was everything good I'd ever known. But she's gone. Has been for 73 years. And you—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "You're fierce in ways she never was. Angry, wounded, willing to burn the world down if it means not being caged. And that terrifies me. Because I know what happens when Moonborn that angry come into their full power. But it also—" His eyes met hers, and she saw the conflict there, the war between fear and something that looked dangerously like hope. "It also makes me think that maybe you're exactly what we need, what I need, someone strong enough to survive what's coming without losing themselves in the process. You're afraid I'll lose myself tonight." She could see it in the tension of his jaw, the way his hand trembled slightly against her skin. "Afraid I'll touch the blood moon's power and become something you can't save." Yes. The honesty of it, the lack of platitudes or reassurances, steadied something in her chest. "I'm afraid too," she admitted. "Afraid of the power. Afraid of what I might become if I let it in completely. But I'm more afraid of staying weak. Of being someone who needs protection instead of someone who can protect herself and the people she—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "The people you what?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "The people I'm starting to care about." The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. You, Kyle, even the idea of other Moonborn who might still be out there hiding, afraid to show what they are. I want to be strong enough to protect that, to be someone worth following instead of someone who needs to be saved. And if being that strong means becoming something I have to stop, something that threatens everything I've built, then you stop me. She held his gaze, unflinching. You keep your promise to Lisa. You do what needs to be done. But until that moment, if it comes, you trust me to know who I am, to hold on to myself even when the power gets overwhelming. The blood moon pulsed overhead, its light painting everything crimson. Arya could feel it pulling at her, at the magic in her veins, at the wolf that was so much larger than the form she'd worn in the pack. Theron's hand slid from her face to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. For a moment she thought he was going to kiss her, saw the desire in his eyes, the want that had nothing to do with power or prophecy, and everything to do with the way their wolves recognized each other. But he didn't. Instead, he pressed his forehead to hers, his breath warm against her lips, and said, I need to tell you something, before you open yourself to the blood moon, before everything changes. You need to know the truth. What truth? Why I'm really afraid. His voice was ragged, barely controlled. It's not just about you becoming dangerous. It's not just about keeping promises or protecting the balance. He stopped, jaw clenching. It's because I'm losing control around you. My wolf recognizes yours in ways I haven't felt since her. And that scares me more than any amount of power you could develop, because I spent 73 years building walls, making sure I never cared enough about anyone to be vulnerable again. And you're destroying those walls just by existing, just by being brave and reckless and refusing to be small. The raw honesty of it made her chest tight. You think caring about me is weakness. I think caring about you could destroy me if I lose you the way I lost her. His hands tightened on her, not painfully, but desperately. And I'm terrified that I'm going to care anyway, that it's already too late to protect myself, that you're already under my skin in ways I can't undo. Arya reached up, her hands finding his face, making him look at her. I'm not asking you to care about me. I'm not asking for anything except honesty. So here's mine. I'm scared too. Scared that what I'm starting to feel for you is just my wolf responding to yours. Scared that you only care because I'm Moonborn, because I represent something you lost. Scared that if I wasn't powerful, if I was just Arya with no prophecy attached, you'd never have looked at me twice. That's not, isn't it? She held his gaze, refusing to let him look away. You pulled me out of that blizzard because Kale said I was Moonborn. You trained me because of what I could become. You followed me here because you're afraid of what the blood moon might turn me into. So how do I know, how do either of us know, that what we're feeling is real and not just destiny and prophecy and the weight of everything we've lost pushing us together? The question hung between them, heavy and unanswerable. Because she was right. They'd been thrown together by circumstance and power and ancient promises. How could either of them know what was real attraction versus what was just their wolves recognizing kindred spirits? What was genuine connection versus what was trauma bonding over shared loss and fear? Theron pulled back slightly, his hands sliding from her neck to her shoulders. I don't know, he said finally, the admission clearly costing him. I don't know what's real and what's just our wolves or the prophecy, or me trying to save you the way I couldn't save her. But I know this. He paused, seeming to gather himself. I know that when you walked away from that conclave, when you chose freedom over safety, I felt something I haven't felt in decades. Pride, not in what you could become, but in who you already are. A wolf brave enough to walk away from protection because accepting it meant compromising yourself. That's not about power. That's about character. And character is what I'm drawn to, Arya, not just your bloodline. The words settled something in her chest. Not all her fears. Those would take time and proof and probably a dozen more honest conversations. But enough. enough to take the next step. Then help me. She stepped back, moving toward the center of the chamber where the blood moon's light fell strongest. Help me do this, not because I'm moonborn or prophesied or any of that, but because you trust me, because you believe I'm strong enough to touch this power and come back as myself. Theron followed, his expression shifting from vulnerable to focused. This was the Alpha King now, the ancient warrior who'd survived 300 years of pack politics and power struggles, the wolf who'd guided countless others through awakenings and transformations. The blood moon will show you things, he said, his voice taking on the cadence of instruction. Visions of what was, what is, what could be. Some will be true. Some will be lies designed to break you. You need to hold on to what's real, onto who you are beneath the power. How do I know what's real? Feel for the connections that matter. Your wolf, your memories, the real ones, not the edited versions we tell ourselves. And he paused, seeming to make a decision. Feel for me. Our wolves are connected now, whether we wanted them to be or not. That resonance we created when I broke your bond, use it. If you start to lose yourself, if the power gets too overwhelming, reach for that connection. I'll pull you back. That could hurt you. If the power floods through our connection, then it hurts me. Simple. Absolute. I've survived worse, and I'd rather risk pain than watch you burn out because you were too afraid to use the tools you have. The trust implicit in that offer made something in her chest ache. He was willing to risk himself. To be her anchor, even though it could damage him, not because she was moonborn, but because he'd chosen to care despite every instinct telling him it was dangerous. Okay. She moved to the exact center of the chamber where the blood moon's light fell like a crimson spotlight. What do I do? Open yourself to it. Don't fight. Don't try to control. Just receive. Let the moon pour its power into you and trust that you're strong enough to contain it without being consumed. And if I'm not strong enough, then I'll do what I have to do. His voice was gentle, but implacable. But I don't think it'll come to that. I think you're going to surprise both of us with exactly how strong you can be. Arya closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and reached for the moon. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Power crashed into her like a tidal wave, vast and ancient and utterly inhuman. She felt her consciousness expand, touching something infinite, felt her wolf surge to the surface, not violently but joyously, finally allowed to be everything it was meant to be. The visions came next. She saw the first Moonborn, wolves who'd stood beneath a different moon and been changed by its light. Saw them running through forests that no longer existed, their fur glowing silver, their eyes burning with power that made modern alphas look like children playing at dominance. She saw the purges, saw pack wolves hunting down Moonborn one by one, saw the fear in the hunters' eyes even as they killed what they couldn't understand, saw entire bloodlines extinguished because they threatened the hierarchy the packs were building. She saw Lisa. Beautiful and fierce, with Coil's eyes and Theron's courage. Saw her die in Theron's arms, saw the light leave her eyes even as she made him promise to protect the next one, to not let her be the last. She saw herself, not as she was, but as she could be. Silver wolf massive enough to make alphas look small, eyes burning with lunar fire, and around her, wolves kneeling, not in submission, in reverence, in recognition of something they'd lost and desperately wanted back. But she also saw the darker path, saw herself drunk on power, demanding submission, becoming the very thing the packs feared, saw Theron standing against her, pain in his eyes even as he did what needed to be done, saw herself die the way Lissa had died, necessary sacrifice to prevent something worse. Both futures were real. Both were possible. The choice was hers. The power kept flooding in, more than her body should have been able to contain. She felt her physical form start to strain, felt the silver fire trying to burn through her skin. Too much. It was too much. She was going to... Theron's presence crashed into her consciousness like an anchor thrown into stormy seas, not drowning her, grounding her, giving her something solid to hold on to while the power raged. "I've got you." His voice echoed through their connection. "You're not alone. You're not going to burn. Just breathe. Just hold on." She held on, focused on the connection between them, that resonance their wolves had created, used it to ground herself while the blood moon poured centuries of accumulated power into her willing form. And slowly, impossibly, her body adapted. The power that had been trying to tear her apart started to settle, became part of her instead of something foreign trying to invade. Her wolf and the lunar magic merged, became inseparable, became something new. When she finally opened her eyes, the world looked different. She could see magic now, actually see it. Threads of power connecting everything, patterns of energy that explained how Coil's wards worked, how Theron's dominance affected the wolves around him, how the moon's influence touched every shifter whether they knew it or not. She could feel the other Moonborn too. Not many, maybe a dozen scattered across the world, their power locked down tight, hiding. But they were there, alive, waiting for someone brave enough to show them it was safe to be what they were. And she could feel Theron, the connection between them blazing bright. No longer just their wolves recognizing each other, but something deeper, more fundamental, a bond that wasn't forced or political, but chosen, built on honesty and trust, and the willingness to be vulnerable despite every instinct screaming to protect themselves. She looked at him across the chamber, saw him swaying slightly, his face pale with the effort of anchoring her through that kind of power surge. "You're okay," he said, relief flooding his voice. "You came back. You're still you." "I'm more than I was." She moved toward him, watched his eyes track her movement with something that looked like awe. "But yeah, still me. Still Arya, just bigger." Bigger is an understatement. Kael's voice came from the doorway, where he'd apparently been watching. "You just channeled a blood moon awakening without burning out or losing yourself. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How impossible?" Felt pretty possible with the right anchor. She reached Theron, saw the way he was fighting to stay upright, and made a decision. She pressed her hand to his chest, over his heart, and deliberately sent some of the power she'd just received flowing back through their connection. Not all of it, but enough to stabilize him, to heal the damage anchoring her had caused. He gasped, his eyes going wide. "What are you—" "Returning the favor." She felt the power settle into him, repairing, strengthening. "You held me together. Least I can do is make sure you didn't break yourself doing it." Something shifted in his expression. Vulnerability giving way to something else, something that looked dangerously like wonder. "Those of us who listen to Kismet Romance Collection," she said softly, holding his gaze, "do you believe love should be safe or consuming?" The question hung between them, charged with everything they'd just been through, everything they'd confessed, everything they were starting to feel. Theron's hand came up, covering hers where it rested against his chest. "I spent 73 years choosing safe, choosing walls and distance, and never caring enough to be hurt, and it kept me alive, but it didn't make me live." His fingers tightened on hers. "So maybe I'm ready to choose consuming, to risk the burn if it means feeling something real. Even knowing what I could become, what the prophecy says I'm meant to do, especially knowing that." He pulled her closer, his free hand sliding into her hair. "Because I've seen both futures now. Felt them through our connection while the moon showed you what was possible, and I know which one I want to fight for, which one I want to help you become. Which one? The one where you're powerful enough that no pack can touch you, where alphas kneel not because you force them, but because they recognize what you represent, freedom from hierarchy that only serves itself, where you're everything the prophecy predicted, but on your own terms, not as a weapon, as a leader worth following. The words settled over her like a vow, like a promise of what they could build together if they were brave enough to try. She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his, and whispered, "And if I fail? If I become the darker version? What then?" "Then I keep my promise to Lissa." His voice was steady despite the pain those words clearly caused. "I do what needs to be done. But Arya?" He pulled back enough to look her in the eyes. "I don't think you will. I think you're going to be magnificent, and I think you're going to change everything." The blood moon pulsed overhead one final time, as if acknowledging what had passed between them. Then its light began to fade, returning to normal lunar radiance. The awakening was complete. Arya Blackwood was fully Moonborn now, connected to the source of her power in ways that couldn't be undone, strong enough to face what was coming, ready to become what the prophecy had predicted. But more than that, she was seen, known, cared for, not because of what she could do, but because of who she was when all the power and prophecy were stripped away. And standing there in Theron's arms, feeling his heart beat against her palm, feeling their wolves settled and content with the connection they'd built, she finally understood what Coil had been trying to teach her in the Grove. Power wasn't the goal. Balance was. Being strong enough to protect herself, but connected enough to remember why that strength mattered. Being powerful enough to stand alone, but brave enough to choose not to. Being Moonborn, but still being Arya. That was the real awakening. And it was just beginning. Chapter 7. The Grand Betrayal. The morning after the blood moon awakening, Arya woke to find the world had shifted while she slept. Not metaphorically, actually shifted. The sanctuary valley looked different, sharper, more vivid, like someone had turned up the saturation on reality itself. She could see the magic now, threading through everything. Could feel the ley lines running beneath the earth, the way power pooled in certain places and avoided others. Could sense the disturbance approaching from the south long before Coil burst into her chamber. "They're coming." His face was grim, his usual composure cracked. "Multiple packs, more than we anticipated. They must have felt the awakening last night, felt the power surge when you bonded with the blood moon." Arya sat up, her heart already racing. How many? At least 8 territories represented, maybe a dozen alphas, and they're not alone. They've brought their councils, their enforcers. This isn't a small delegation, Arya. This is a full assembly. They're invoking the convergence. The word meant nothing to her, but the way Kale said it made her stomach drop. What's the convergence? Old law, older than the packs. When a threat is deemed significant enough to endanger all shifter territories, any alpha can call for a convergence, a gathering of all councils to make binding decisions about how to handle it. It overrides individual pack authority, creates a unified front. He moved to the window, looking out at the valley that had been peaceful just hours ago. And they've called it for you, declared you a threat significant enough that all packs need to unite to address it. They felt me awaken. The understanding settled over her, cold and certain. Felt the power I pulled from the blood moon, and now they're afraid. Terrified. Theron's voice came from the doorway. He looked like he hadn't slept, his hair disheveled, his expression haunted. Every alpha within 500 miles felt it, some farther. A surge of Moonborn power that strong. It's like setting off a flare visible to every shifter with any sensitivity. They know what you are now, know what you could become, and they're not going to wait to see if you use that power wisely. Arya stood, feeling the new power settle in her bones. She was different now, fundamentally changed by what the blood moon had given her, stronger, more connected to the source, but also more visible, more vulnerable in ways she hadn't anticipated. What do they want? To see you. Theron moved into the room, his presence filling the space. To witness what you've become, to make a formal determination about whether you're a threat that needs to be neutralized. Neutralized. The euphemism was almost funny. You mean killed? I mean bound initially. Stripped of your power and placed under permanent council supervision. Killing comes later, if you resist or if they determine you're too dangerous, even contained. His jaw was tight, the muscle jumping with tension. It's the same process they used on the last Moonborn they caught. Before they hunted Lisa, they tried binding first, stripping her power. When that didn't work, when she proved too strong to be fully contained, they decided execution was the only option. The casual way he described it made rage kindle in Arya's chest. And you're going to let them try. Let them put me on trial for existing. I'm going to attend the convergence as required by law. His voice was carefully controlled. Going to hear their evidence and their arguments, and then I'm going to do everything in my power to convince them that you're not a threat. That you can be trusted with the power you've developed. And if they don't believe you, the silence that followed was answer enough. Kyle moved between them, his expression serious. The convergence has already begun assembling at the neutral grounds, the same amphitheater where they held the conclave. But this time, it's not just alphas, it's full councils, elders who remember the old stories, wolves who've been training their whole lives to hunt things exactly like what you've become. Theron can advocate for you, but ultimately, the decision isn't his to make. It's collective, and collective decisions tend toward eliminating threats rather than taking risks on trust. So I'm supposed to just walk into a trap. Arya looked between them, saw the conflict in both their faces. Present myself for judgment to wolves who've already decided I'm too dangerous to live. You're supposed to prove them wrong. Theron's voice was tight. Show them you're in control, that the power isn't controlling you, that you're not the threat they fear. By being docile, submissive, everything I've spent weeks learning not to be? By being strategic. He moved closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. By understanding that sometimes the brave thing isn't charging into battle, it's playing the long game, giving them what they need to see so they don't feel threatened enough to take drastic action. She pulled away from his touch, something cold settling in her chest. You want me to perform, to put on a show of being controllable so they don't decide to bind me. I want you to survive. His hands fell to his sides. I want you to live long enough to become everything you're meant to be, and that means not giving them an excuse to see you as an immediate threat. Is that what Lissa did? Performed for them? Tried to prove she was safe? The pain that crossed Theron's face was answer enough. Lissa refused to play politics, refused to be anything less than exactly what she was. Powerful, defiant, unwilling to submit to judgment from wolves she considered beneath her. And they killed her for it, hunted her down like an animal and put her in the ground because she wouldn't pretend to be small. And you think I should do differently, should be what she wouldn't. I think you should be smart enough to pick your battles. His voice was rising now, frustration bleeding through. Strong enough to know when fighting gets you killed and when strategic retreat lets you live to fight another day. I think you should trust that I know how these things work, how to navigate pack politics in ways that keep you breathing. By making me bow. The words came out flat. By making me prove I'm not a threat, by acting like I don't have the power to be one. That's what you're really asking, isn't it? For me to go back to being small so they don't feel threatened. That's not... He stopped, ran his hand through his hair. You're twisting what I'm saying. Am I? She held his gaze, saw the conflict there, the fear barely contained. Because it sounds like you're asking me to be exactly what my old pack wanted, controlled, manageable, powerful enough to be useful but not powerful enough to be dangerous, and I won't do that. Not again. Not even for you. Then what will you do? The question came out sharper than probably intended. Walk into the convergence and dare them to try to take you. Fight every alpha there to prove you're stronger? That's not strategy, Arya. That's suicide with extra steps. Maybe I don't go at all. The idea formed as she spoke it. Maybe I leave, disappear before they can assemble their judgment, make them chase me if they want to pass sentence. Running won't work. Kale's voice was gentle but firm. They'll hunt you, every pack working together, coordinated. You're strong, yes, stronger than you were. But you're not strong enough to evade that kind of organized pursuit. They'll find you, and when they do, they won't bother with trials or binding. They'll just kill you and call it self-defense. The trap was closing. Go to the convergence and submit to judgment or run and be hunted down. Either way, she lost autonomy. Either way, she became what the packs wanted her to be, contained or dead. There has to be another option. But even as she said it, she knew there wasn't. The moment she'd accepted the blood moon's power, the moment she'd let herself become fully Moonborn, she'd crossed a line the packs couldn't forgive. The other option is you trust me. Theron stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost pleading. Trust that I can navigate this, that I can convince enough of the council that binding isn't necessary, that you can be monitored, guided, kept from becoming a threat without being imprisoned or killed. Monitored, guided. Each word tasted bitter. You mean controlled. You mean keeping me on a leash long enough that they stop being afraid. I mean keeping you alive long enough to change their minds about what Moonborn represent. His hands came up again, this time grasping her shoulders. Give me time. Let me work the politics. Let me show them that you're not Lissa, that you're smart enough to understand the bigger picture, patient enough to wait for the right moment to challenge the system instead of throwing yourself against it and breaking. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the desperation there, the fear, not just for her, but of failing again, of watching another Moonborn die because he couldn't protect them. And underneath that, she saw something else. Doubt. The smallest flicker of uncertainty about whether she could actually be trusted with the power she'd developed. Whether the connection they'd built was strong enough to keep her from becoming what he feared. He was hedging, preparing for the possibility that she might need to be stopped. The realization cut deeper than any rejection. You don't trust me. The words came out quiet, but they landed like stones. You say you do. Say you believe I'm strong enough to hold on to myself, but you're already planning for what happens if I'm not. Already thinking about how to contain me if I become too dangerous. That's not... He stopped, and the hesitation was damning. I'm being realistic. Planning for contingencies doesn't mean I don't trust you. It means I'm smart enough to know that power corrupts, that the best intentions can be twisted. That I need to be prepared for any outcome, including the outcome where you have to put me down like you put down the others. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, Theron spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, including that, because I care about you enough to make the hard choice if it comes to it, to not let you become something that destroys everything, even if it destroys me to stop you. Be real? Is hesitation worse than rejection? Arya felt the answer settle in her bones. Rejection was clean. Painful, but clean. It told you exactly where you stood. But hesitation? Hesitation was torture. It was someone saying they believed in you while simultaneously planning for your failure. It was trust with an asterisk, love with conditions. It was worse, so much worse. I need air. She pulled away from his touch, moved toward the chamber door. I need to think. Arya. Don't. She stopped, didn't turn around. Don't try to convince me this is for my own good. Don't tell me you're doing this because you care. Just give me space to figure out what I'm going to do. She left before he could respond. Walked through the sanctuary's impossible corridors until she found the main entrance, then kept walking into the valley beyond. The wards recognized her now, let her pass without resistance. She was keyed into this place in ways that went beyond permission. The blood moon had bonded her to every sanctuary the Moonborn had ever built. She could feel them now scattered across the world, could access them if she needed to, could disappear into them if she chose. The thought was tempting. Just vanish. Let the pack search for her while she moved between sanctuaries, growing stronger, learning to fully control the power that terrified them so much. But that was running, and she'd promised herself she was done running. She found a clearing at the valley's edge where she could see the forest stretching south toward pack territories, toward the amphitheater where the convergence was assembling to decide her fate. She could feel them. Dozens of powerful wolves, all focused on the same goal, containing or eliminating the Moonborn threat before it could challenge their authority. Her wolf stirred, not aggressively, but restlessly. It wanted to fight, wanted to show them exactly what a fully awakened Moonborn could do when threatened, wanted to prove that she was stronger than all of them combined, but that would just confirm their fears. Would turn her into exactly what they claimed she was, a weapon too dangerous to exist. She needed a different approach, something that showed strength without aggression, that demonstrated control without submission. She needed to. The attack came without warning. One moment she was alone in the clearing, the next wolves erupted from the tree line, 6 of them, massive and coordinated, moving with the precision of trained hunters. Enforcers, council wolves specifically trained to handle rogue shifters and supernatural threats. They'd come for her early, hadn't even waited for the convergence to make a formal decision. Her wolf surged to the surface, the shift happening in less than a heartbeat. But this wasn't her old form. This was her true shape, the massive silver wolf the blood moon had revealed, twice the size of normal shifters. Fur glowing faintly even in daylight, eyes burning with lunar fire. The enforcers hesitated, just for a moment seeing what they'd been sent to capture. That moment was all Arya needed. She moved, not attacking, but evading. Used the speed her awakening had given her to flow between them like water, heading for the tree line on the opposite side of the clearing. But they were good, trained for this. They spread out, cutting off escape routes, forcing her toward the center of the clearing where they could surround her properly. One lunged. She twisted, felt claws rake across her shoulder instead of her throat. Pain flared, and with it, rage. The silver fire kindled beneath her skin, responding to the threat, to the violence. No, she couldn't lose control, couldn't give them proof that she was dangerous. She forced the fire down, focused on defense instead of offense, dodged instead of striking back, showed them she could be threatened without becoming a threat. But they weren't trying to kill her. They were trying to capture her. And the difference became clear when she felt the first binding spell hit her flank. Magic. Old magic designed specifically to suppress shifter power. She felt it sink into her like hooks, trying to lock down her wolf, trying to force her back to human form where she'd be vulnerable. The second spell hit before she could shake off the first, then the third. The enforcers had formed a circle now, chanting in unison, weaving binding magic that would have incapacitated a normal shifter instantly. But she wasn't normal. The blood moon's power fought back against the bindings, burning through them almost as fast as they could be applied. Almost. With 6 wolves casting simultaneously, the bindings were accumulating faster than she could burn through them. She felt her movements growing sluggish, felt her wolf being forced down despite her resistance. They were going to take her, going to drag her to the convergence already bound, already proven unable to resist pack authority. The rage that had been simmering ignited into something white-hot. No, she wouldn't be taken, wouldn't be displayed like a trophy, wouldn't let them prove she could be controlled. The silver fire erupted before she could stop it. It poured from her fur, her eyes, her open mouth as she threw her head back and howled. Not a wolf's howl, something older, something that carried the weight of every Moonborn who'd ever been hunted, ever been bound, ever been killed for being too powerful to tolerate. The binding spells shattered, just disintegrated under the force of the power she was channeling. The enforcers were thrown back, yelping as the fire touched them, not burning flesh but searing away their magic, their confidence, their certainty that she could be contained. Arya shifted back to human, the change violent and uncontrolled. She stood naked in the clearing, skin glowing with silver light, hair floating on power that had nothing to do with wind. "You want to bind me?" Her voice resonated with harmonics that made the enforcers whimper. "Try, please. I'd love to show you exactly why your ancestors feared the Moonborn enough to try to exterminate us." The head enforcer, a scarred male she recognized from the Blood Moon pack, shifted to human, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "We were sent to escort you to the convergence. The binding was just a precaution. A precaution." She laughed, the sound edged with hysteria and rage. "You attacked me, in a sanctuary, tried to bind me before I'd even been formally accused of anything, and you call it a precaution?" The council can go to hell. The silver fire pulsed brighter. "I'm done letting packs decide what I am and what I'm worth, done submitting to judgment from wolves who've already made up their minds, done being afraid of my own power because it makes other people uncomfortable." She felt Theron's presence before she saw him, felt him approaching at a run, drawn by the power surge, by the fight he'd probably felt through their connection. He emerged from the tree line, took in the scene, the scattered enforcers, her glowing with uncontrolled power, the clearing scorched by silver fire. And she saw it. The moment his expression shifted from concern to calculation, the Alpha King assessing a threat, determining how to contain it, planning for the contingency he'd mentioned, Arya. His voice was calm, controlled, the tone you'd use on a wild animal you were trying not to spook. "Stand down. These wolves were acting without authorization. I'll handle this, but you need to power down before someone gets hurt." Someone already got hurt. She gestured to her shoulder where the enforcer's claws had torn through fur and flesh. "They attacked me, Theron, tried to bind me, and you want me to stand down, to prove I'm not a threat by submitting to the wolves who just tried to capture me." They were following orders. But his eyes said he knew how bad this looked. Orders that shouldn't have been given. But responding with this level of force, he gestured to the scorched clearing, to the power still crackling around her. "This is exactly what they're afraid of, exactly what I was trying to prevent. By asking me to be smaller, to control myself while they get to attack with impunity." The fire pulsed in time with her heartbeat. "I won't do it. Won't be the one who has to constantly prove I'm safe while they get to be as violent as they want." "Then what will you do?" The question was quiet but weighted with everything unspoken between them. "Fight them all? Prove you're as dangerous as they claim? Become the weapon they fear? I'll be what I am." She felt the power settle into her bones, felt her control solidifying even as the rage still burned. Moonborn, powerful. Unwilling to be caged or controlled or killed to make Pax feel secure. And if that makes me a threat... She met his gaze, saw the conflict there, the fear. "Then I'm a threat, and you get to decide what you do about it." The moment stretched between them, charged with the question neither wanted to ask. Would he stand with her? Or would he do what he'd done 73 years ago, arrive too late to save a Moonborn from the Pack's judgment? The convergence is waiting. His voice was carefully neutral. They felt the power surge. They're going to demand answers. Demand to see you, assess the threat level. If you don't come willingly, they'll come for me. She finished the sentence. Send more enforcers, probably alphas this time, and we'll have the same fight, just with higher stakes. Yes? She looked at him. At the wolf who'd pulled her from a blizzard, who'd trained her, who'd anchored her through the blood moon awakening, who'd confessed he was starting to care, while simultaneously planning for the possibility that caring wouldn't be enough. And she made her choice. I'll go. The words came out steady despite the chaos in her chest. I'll face the convergence. Let them see what I am. Let them make their judgment. But I won't be bound, Theron. Won't let them strip my power or lock me away. I'll defend myself if they try. And if that means fighting every wolf there... She let the silver fire flare one more time before deliberately pulling it back, showing control even in her anger. Then that's what it means. They'll kill you. The words were barely audible. If you resist, if you fight back, they'll have the justification they need to eliminate the threat permanently. Maybe. She called clothes from the sanctuary, learned that trick from Kale, and dressed while the enforcers watched warily. Or maybe I'm strong enough now that they can't. Maybe the blood moon gave me more than they're prepared to handle. Only one way to find out. She started walking toward the valley's edge, toward the path that would take her to Pack territories, to the convergence, to the judgment she'd been running from since this all began. Behind her, Theron called out one more time, Arya, please don't do this. Don't throw your life away on pride. She stopped, looked back over her shoulder. It's not pride, it's principle. I won't live as a prisoner. Won't spend my existence proving I'm not dangerous to wolves who'll never trust me anyway. I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. Then I can't protect you. The admission sounded like it was being torn from him. If you walk into that convergence refusing to compromise, refusing to show them you can be trusted, I can't advocate for you, can't defend decisions I think are suicidal. There it was. The real hesitation, not just planning for contingencies, but already pulling back, already protecting himself from the pain of losing another Moonborn by refusing to fully commit to saving this one. Is hesitation worse than rejection? She had her answer. I know. She held his gaze one last time. And I release you from whatever obligation you feel. From promises to Lissa or duty or guilt or whatever made you pull me from that blizzard. You don't have to protect me, Theron. Don't have to stand with me. Don't have to care. I absolve you of all of it. The pain that crossed his face should have been satisfying, should have felt like justice. Instead, it just felt like loss. She turned and kept walking. Didn't look back. Couldn't. Behind her, she felt the moment he stopped following, the moment he made his choice to let her go alone. The enforcers fell in around her, not restraining but escorting, making sure she actually went to the convergence instead of running. They kept their distance, wary of the power still crackling under her skin, of the wolf who'd burned through their bindings like they were nothing. Good. Let them be wary. Let them fear what they'd tried to capture. She was done being afraid, done questioning whether she deserved the power she'd been given, done letting other people's fear dictate her choices. She was Moonborn, child of the flame, and if the Packs wanted to judge her, well, she'd give them something worth judging. The silver fire pulsed beneath her skin in anticipation. The convergence was about to learn exactly what happened when you tried to cage the moon. Chapter 8. The power claimed the amphitheater was full. Not just full, packed beyond capacity with every alpha, every council member, every enforcer who could make the journey. hundreds of wolves, all gathered to witness the judgment of the last Moonborn. Arya felt their eyes on her the moment she crested the ridge, felt their fear, their hatred, their determination to see her contained or destroyed. The collective weight of it would have crushed her a month ago, would have made her small, made her doubt, made her want to prove she wasn't the threat they feared. Now it just made her angry. The enforcers led her down the stone steps into the amphitheater proper. Someone had prepared for this. There was a circle at the center, marked with binding runes that glowed faintly with suppressive magic. They wanted her contained before the proceedings even began. She stopped at the circle's edge, looked at the runes, then deliberately stepped over them. The binding magic activated immediately, trying to lock down her power, force her wolf into submission. She felt it wrap around her like chains, felt it try to compress everything the blood moon had awakened. She burned through it in less than 3 seconds. The runes shattered, their light dying as her silver fire consumed the magic fueling them. She stood in the center of the circle, unmarked, unbound, and very clearly not interested in playing by their rules. The assembled wolves erupted into chaos, shouting accusations, demands that she be restrained immediately before she proved how dangerous she was. Enough! Elder Corrin's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The ancient Shadow Fang Alpha stood at the head of the council's semicircle, his expression grave. The Moonborn will be given the opportunity to speak, to defend herself against the charges brought before this convergence. That is law, that is tradition, and we will honor it, even if she chooses not to honor our attempts at peaceful containment. Peaceful. Arya's voice carried across the suddenly silent amphitheater. You call sending enforcers to attack me in a sanctuary peaceful? You call binding magic designed to strip my power peaceful? Interesting definitions you're working with, Elder. You were invited to attend the convergence. Corrin's tone remained level. The enforcers were sent as escort when you didn't respond to that invitation. I was given less than 12 hours to respond before you sent wolves to capture me. That's not an invitation. That's a trap with a polite veneer. Because you are a threat. The Blood Moon Alpha stepped forward, his massive frame radiating controlled aggression. You awakened during a blood moon, drew power that every shifter within 500 miles could feel, power that hasn't been seen in this world for over a century. You expect us to just trust that you'll use that power wisely? That you won't become exactly what your ancestors were, tyrants who demanded submission from lesser wolves? Lesser. Arya focused on him, saw him flinch slightly under the intensity of her gaze. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not whether I'm dangerous, whether I'm stronger than you, whether the hierarchy you've spent your lives building is about to be challenged by a wolf who doesn't need your permission to access her full power. You prove my point. He gestured to the shattered binding runes. You can't even submit to basic security measures without demonstrating your superiority, without showing us that you consider our laws, our traditions, our attempts at maintaining order to be beneath you. Your laws were designed to suppress wolves like me. Your traditions were built on the graves of my ancestors. And your order requires that I be small so you can feel big. She let the silver fire kindle in her eyes, not threatening, just present. So yes, I consider them beneath me. Not because I'm arrogant, because they're unjust. Then you admit you have no intention of integrating into pack society. Elder Corrin's voice was almost sad. No intention of submitting to the authority structures that have kept shifters from descending into chaos for centuries. I admit that I won't submit to authority that exists solely to maintain the dominance of wolves who are terrified of being challenged. Arya swept her gaze across the assembled councils. But integration, coexistence, I'd be happy to discuss those, if you were actually interested in coexistence instead of containment. We are interested in survival. A new voice, female powerful, coming from a section of the assembly Arya hadn't focused on yet. An alpha she didn't recognize, older, with scars that spoke of battles survived. The last time Moonborn walked freely among the packs, they nearly destroyed us, started wars, demanded territories, killed any wolf who refused to bow to their superiority. You want us to just forget that history? Pretend you're different because you say so? I want you to acknowledge that I am not responsible for what other Moonborn did a century ago. Arya's voice was steady despite the rage building in her chest. I am not my ancestors. I am not their crimes. I am a wolf who was cast out, hunted, and nearly killed for having power I didn't ask for and couldn't control. And now that I've learned control, now that I'm no longer dying of rejection sickness and suppressed magic, you want to punish me for surviving. We want assurance. Corrin stepped forward, his ancient eyes assessing her. Proof that you can be trusted, that the power you've developed won't be turned against the packs. And the only proof we can accept is submission to council oversight. Voluntary binding of your most dangerous abilities, acceptance of restrictions that ensure you cannot become the threat history says you will inevitably become. There it was, the real demand. Submit to being defanged, declawed, turned into a pet Moonborn who posed no real challenge to pack authority. No, the word was simple, absolute. I won't accept binding. Won't accept restrictions beyond those that apply to every other wolf. Won't accept punishment for crimes I haven't committed based on fear of what I might do. Then you leave us no choice. The Blood Moon Alpha's voice was cold. Under convergence law, a threat that refuses containment can be eliminated permanently for the safety of all territories. You'd have to catch me first. Arya let her power rise slightly, just enough to make the air pressure change, to make every wolf in the amphitheater feel the weight of what she'd become. And I'm significantly harder to catch now than I was a month ago. This is not a game. Corrin's voice carried genuine warning. We have resources you haven't seen. Weapons designed specifically to counter Moonborn power. Magic your ancestors couldn't resist. You may be strong, child, but you are not invincible. Push us too far, and you will learn exactly how we eliminated your bloodline the first time. The threat hung in the air, ugly and honest. Arya was opening her mouth to respond when she felt it, a massive surge of power from the south. Not lunar magic, something darker, older, wrong in ways that made her wolf recoil instinctively. Every alpha in the amphitheater felt it too. Heads turned, postures shifted from aggressive to alert. "What is that?" someone asked, voicing what they were all thinking. Kyle appeared at the amphitheater's edge, moving faster than should be possible, his expression more alarmed than Arya had ever seen it. "We have a problem. The ritual site. Someone's trying to activate it. Someone who shouldn't even know it exists." "What ritual site?" Corrin's full attention was on Kale now. "The one your ancestors used to bind the first Moonborn." Kale's gaze swept the assembly. The place where they performed the original suppression magic. It's been dormant for over a century, the wards maintaining themselves. But someone just broke those wards. Someone's trying to reactivate the ritual, and if they succeed... The ground shook. Not an earthquake. Something worse. The ley lines beneath the amphitheater were destabilizing, power bleeding off in directions it shouldn't go. "If they succeed, what?" the scarred female alpha demanded. "If they succeed, every wolf with Moonborn blood, even diluted, even trace amounts, will be suppressed, forced into a permanent weakened state. It's indiscriminate magic, designed to cripple an entire bloodline." Kale looked at Arya specifically. "And you, as a fully awakened Moonborn? It'll either kill you outright or bind you so completely you'll wish you were dead." The assembled wolves erupted into chaos again, but this time it was different. This wasn't anger at Arya. This was confusion, fear, the sudden realization that something was very wrong. Who would do this? Corrin's voice cut through the noise. Who even knows about the ritual site? Someone who wants the Moonborn bloodline eliminated permanently. Chael's expression was grim. Someone who's been working toward this for longer than we realized. Someone who... Another surge of power, stronger this time, and with it, a scream that echoed across the mental plane every shifter shared. Theron. Arya felt it through their connection, felt his pain, felt him being overwhelmed by magic that was specifically designed to counter his kind of power, felt him fighting, resisting, and slowly losing. They have the Alpha King. Kyle's voice was flat. Whoever's activating the ritual captured him. They're using his power to fuel the binding. His connection to the old magic makes him the perfect catalyst. The perfect sacrifice, he didn't say. But everyone heard it anyway. Arya felt the eyes turn back to her, saw the calculation in every face. They needed someone powerful enough to stop this. Someone with the kind of magic that could counter a ritual designed to suppress Moonborn. They needed exactly what they'd been trying to destroy. The ritual site is 3 miles south. Chael was looking at her now, his expression grave. Through territory you've never seen, past defenses designed to kill Moonborn on contact. And even if you reach it, even if you can fight through whoever's performing the ritual, you'll have to break magic that's been building for over a century, magic your ancestors couldn't resist. But I might be able to. Arya finished the thought. Because I'm freshly awakened. Because the blood moon gave me power that's different from what the ritual was designed to counter. Might is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Kyle's voice was gentle. This could kill you, Arya. Probably will kill you. The ritual is specifically designed to destroy Moonborn who try to interfere with it. And if I don't try? She looked at the assembled alphas, saw the conflict in their faces. What happens when every wolf with even trace Moonborn genetics is suddenly weakened? How many of your pack members carry that bloodline without knowing it? How many of you do? The silence that followed was damning. Approximately 30% of modern shifters carry trace Moonborn genetics. Chael's voice was clinical. The bloodline was never fully eliminated, just suppressed, hidden, bred out over generations until most wolves don't even know they're carrying it. But the ritual doesn't care about percentages. It targets anyone with the markers, and if it activates at full power... He stopped. Let them imagine the implications. A third of the shifter population suddenly weakened, vulnerable. Some might die outright if their Moonborn genetics were too concentrated. This wasn't just about area anymore. This was about survival of the species. I'll go. The words came out before she'd fully thought them through. I'll try to stop the ritual. Try to save Theron. Try to prevent whatever catastrophe this is building toward. Why? The Blood Moon Alpha's voice was suspicious. We were literally just discussing executing you. Why would you risk yourself to save us? Because I'm not you. Arya held his gaze. Because when I have the power to help, I help, even if the people I'm helping would rather see me dead. Because that's what power is supposed to be for. Protection, not domination. And because... She stopped, swallowed hard. Because Theron is suffering. And whatever he's done, whatever he's failed to do, he doesn't deserve to die fueling a ritual designed to destroy what he spent his life trying to protect. She turned to Chael. Show me where. Tell me what I'm walking into, and then get out of my way. You'll need help. Corrin's voice was thoughtful. The ritual site will be defended. You're powerful, yes, but you're not an army. I'll need you all to stay here and figure out who's behind this. Arya cut him off. Because someone in this convergence knew about the ritual site. Someone gave the order to activate it. Someone wants the Moonborn eliminated badly enough to risk destabilizing the entire shifter world. Find them. Stop them. Make sure they can't try this again. She started moving toward the amphitheater exit, felt the power building in her veins in preparation for what was coming. Arya. Corrin's voice stopped her. If you do this, if you save the Alpha King and stop the ritual, the Convergence will reconsider its judgment, will acknowledge that you used your power to protect rather than destroy. I'm not doing this for your approval. She looked back over her shoulder. I'm doing it because it's right. Figure out the difference, Elder. It might save your life someday. Then she was moving, Kale beside her, both of them running towards something that would probably kill her. The forest blurred around them as they raced south. Kyle was fast, faster than any wolf Arya had seen, but she was keeping pace easily now, the Blood Moon's power making her something more than she'd been. The defenses will activate the moment you cross the boundary. Kale's voice was tight with worry. Old magic, designed to recognize and destroy Moonborn. I can get you close, but the last quarter mile you're on your own. What kind of defenses? The kind your ancestors died trying to break through. He vaulted over a fallen tree without breaking stride. Silver fire that burns from the inside, binding spells that shatter bones. And at the center, the ritual itself, a construct of pure suppression magic powered by the sacrifice of whoever's strong enough to fuel it. Theron. They were burning through Theron's power to fuel the very magic designed to destroy what he'd spent 73 years protecting. The irony was vicious. They reached the boundary in less than 10 minutes. Arya could feel it, a wall of hostile magic that made her skin crawl, just being near it. This is as far as I can go. Kale stopped, his hand on her arm. You cross that line, you're in their territory, their trap, their ritual, and I can't help you there. I know. She looked at the invisible barrier, felt her wolf pressing close to the surface. Kyle, if I don't come back, if this kills me, tell Theron. She stopped. Not sure what message to leave for a wolf who'd hesitated when she needed certainty. Tell him yourself. Kale's expression was fierce. Survive this, Arya. Prove that Moonborn can do more than just destroy. Prove that power can be used to heal instead of harm. Prove that you're everything Lyssa should have been allowed to become. She nodded once, then turned to face the barrier. The moment she crossed it, the defenses activated. Silver fire erupted around her. Not her fire, but a twisted mockery of it. Fire designed to burn Moonborn specifically, to target the lunar magic in their blood and turn it against them. It hurt. God, it hurt. Like every cell in her body was being immolated from within. But Arya had learned something in the weeks since her awakening. Pain was information, and information could be used. She didn't fight the fire. Didn't try to resist it. Instead, she pulled it in. Let it flow into her. Let it mix with her own power. Let it fuel what she was about to do. The fire sputtered, confused. It was designed to destroy, not to be consumed, not to be turned into fuel. She kept moving, kept pulling the hostile magic into herself and transmuting it into something she could use, kept walking deeper into territory that should have killed her instantly. The binding spells came next. Invisible chains of pure force designed to shatter bones and lock down movement. She felt them wrap around her, felt them constrict, and she burned through them the same way she'd burned through the runes in the amphitheater, with power that refused to be contained. The ritual site appeared ahead, a circular clearing marked with stones that predated shifter civilization. And at its center, bound to a pillar of dark stone, was Theron. He looked half dead. His skin was gray, his eyes barely open, blood trickling from his nose and ears. The ritual was draining him, burning through his ancient power to fuel magic designed to destroy what he'd protected. And standing at the ritual's edge, directing the flow of magic with practiced precision, was someone Arya recognized. Elder Margaret, the wolf who'd been part of her childhood pack, the wolf who'd called her unstable when she was 7, the wolf who'd sat on the council that approved her exile. You. Arya's voice was raw with betrayal. You're behind this. You're trying to eliminate the Moonborn bloodline. Trying? Margaret's expression was cold, satisfied. Succeeding, the ritual is nearly complete. In less than 10 minutes, every wolf carrying Moonborn genetics will be suppressed, weakened, and those like you, with concentrated bloodline, you'll simply cease to exist. Your power will be stripped away, and without it to sustain you, your body will fail. Quick, relatively painless. More mercy than you deserve, frankly. Why? The question came out broken. I was a child. I never hurt anyone. Why hunt us? Why spend decades plotting to destroy a bloodline that was already nearly extinct? Because you're an abomination. Margaret's voice was flat, absolute. You and every wolf like you. Power without pack. Strength without hierarchy. You represent chaos. The breakdown of everything that keeps our society functional. The Moonborn nearly destroyed us once. I will not allow that to happen again. She raised her hands, and the ritual pulsed brighter. Theron screamed, his body arching against the restraints as more power was ripped from him. Stop! Arya stepped forward, felt the ritual's magic push back against her. Let him go. This is necessary. Margaret's eyes were bright with zealotry. You cannot be allowed to exist. Any of you. The bloodline must be purged, the threat eliminated. And when this is done, when the last Moonborn is gone, the packs will finally be safe, finally be able to build without fear of being conquered by wolves who think themselves gods. The ritual pulsed again, and Arya felt it this time, felt the magic reaching for her, trying to suppress, trying to strip away everything the blood moon had given her. She had 2 choices: run, save herself, let the ritual complete and doom a third of the shifter population to weakness or death. Or step into the ritual's center, confront the magic directly, try to break something that had been designed by wolves who dedicated their lives to making it unbreakable. If you believe powerful women should never apologize. The thought crystallized into certainty. She wasn't going to apologize for existing, wasn't going to run from power she'd earned through suffering and survival, wasn't going to let fear, hers or theirs, dictate what she could become. She stepped into the ritual circle. The magic slammed into her like a physical force, trying to lock her down, trying to strip her power. She felt it wrap around her wolf, felt it sink hooks into her lunar magic, felt it start to drain, and she laughed. Because this ritual, this thing Margaret thought was her triumph, was just magic. Old magic, yes. Powerful magic, absolutely. But still just magic. And magic, Cale had taught her, was a conversation. Arya reached deep, past the pain, past the fear, past everything human, and touched the source, the moon itself, the entity that had changed the first wolves, the power that had created the Moonborn bloodline in the first place. I need help, she sent across that connection. I need strength. I need to break this thing that was built to destroy what you created. The moon's response was immediate and overwhelming. Power flooded into her, not the controlled flow of the blood moon awakening. This was a deluge, a torrent. The accumulated magic of every Moonborn who'd ever lived, every drop of lunar power that had been suppressed or destroyed, all of it channeling through her. Her body couldn't contain it, wasn't built to hold this much power, so she didn't try. She let it pour through her, let herself become a conduit instead of a container, Let the moon use her as a vessel to deliver its judgment on magic that had been designed to suppress its gift. Silver fire erupted from her skin, her eyes, her open mouth. But this wasn't destructive fire. This was cleansing. This was the moon reclaiming what had been stolen, rebalancing what had been twisted. The ritual shattered. Not slowly, not gradually, it just broke. The ancient stones cracked. The binding magic dissolved. The suppression that had been building for a century dispersed like smoke in wind. And through it all, Arya stood at the center, burning with power that should have destroyed her, but somehow didn't. She felt Theron's bonds break, felt him collapse, freed from the ritual's drain, felt Margaret's shock and rage as decades of planning dissolved in less than a minute. The ground beneath them began to shift, not breaking apart, responding. The land itself was bowing to the power flowing through Arya, recognizing what she'd become. Not just Moonborn, not just child of the flame, the moon's avatar, its chosen vessel, its voice in a world that had tried to silence it. She turned to Margaret, saw the fear in the elder's eyes, saw her realize exactly how badly she'd miscalculated. You wanted to eliminate the threat. Arya's voice resonated with harmonics that made the air vibrate. You wanted to prove that Moonborn could be destroyed. That power like mine couldn't exist in your carefully ordered world. She let the silver fire pulse brighter, felt the land respond, felt every wolf within miles, including the convergence still assembled at the amphitheater, feel the weight of what was happening here. You failed. Simple words carrying the weight of prophecy and power and absolute certainty. The Moonborn bloodline will not be extinguished, will not be suppressed, will not be caged or controlled or destroyed to make wolves like you feel safe. We will exist. We will thrive. And you will learn to coexist with power you cannot control. She raised her hand and Margaret flinched, clearly expecting execution. But Arya didn't kill her. Instead, she reached into the Elder's magic, found the same trace of Moonborn genetics that ran through 30% of shifters, and woke it up, not to full power, just enough. Just enough for Margaret to feel what it was like to carry magic that didn't fit into pack hierarchies, to understand viscerally what she'd been trying to destroy. Margaret gasped, her eyes going wide as power she'd never known she carried flickered to life in her chest. Live with that. Arya's voice was quiet now, controlled despite the power still flowing through her. Live with the knowledge that you carry the very bloodline you tried to eliminate. Live with understanding why we won't be suppressed. And think very carefully before you ever try something like this again. She turned away from Margaret, moved to where Theron lay gasping on the ground. He looked up at her, and she saw the awe in his eyes, the recognition of what she'd become, what she'd proven she could be. You came back. His voice was barely a whisper. Even after everything, you came back. I came back because it was right. She knelt beside him, let some of the moon's power flow into him, healing, restoring what the ritual had drained. Not because you deserved it, not because we're okay, but because no one deserves to die like that. She stood, looked back at the broken ritual site, at Margaret staring at her hands in horror and wonder. This isn't over, Arya said quietly. She's the one who activated the ritual, but someone told her how. Someone provided the resources. Someone wanted this badly enough to risk destabilizing the entire shifter world. Then we find them. Theron was sitting up now, color returning to his face. We find whoever's behind this and we make sure they can't try again. We. She looked at him, saw the determination in his eyes despite the exhaustion. Last time I checked, you were planning contingencies for putting me down if I became too dangerous. What changed? You did. He gestured to the shattered ritual, to the land still humming with residual power. You walked into a trap designed to kill you, faced magic that should have destroyed you, and you used the power, all that impossible power, not to conquer or dominate or prove your superiority. You used it to save, to heal, to prove that Moonborn can be exactly what we needed them to be all along. He struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. I was wrong to hesitate, wrong to plan for your failure instead of believing in your success, and I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air between them, genuine and costly. Arya felt the anger that had been driving her start to ease. Not disappear. The hurt from his hesitation wouldn't heal that fast, but soften enough that she could see past it, could see the wolf who'd tried to protect her, even when protection meant planning for worst-case scenarios. We're not okay. She held his gaze. We're going to need time, honesty, a dozen more conversations like this before we even start to approach okay. I know, but we can work toward okay. She offered her hand, helped steady him when he wobbled. If you're willing to actually trust me instead of just saying you do. I'm willing. He squeezed her hand, the gesture intimate despite everything. To try, to fail, to keep trying anyway. Because you're right, hesitation is worse than rejection, and I'm done hesitating. The moment between them felt fragile, new. The beginning of something that could be genuine if they were both brave enough to let it. Behind them, Kale emerged from the forest, his expression shifting from concern to relief to something like pride. The convergence felt what happened. His voice carried across the clearing. Every alpha within 500 miles felt the ritual break, felt the power you channeled. They know what you did, what you are. And, Arya was almost afraid to ask, an elder Corrin sent a message. Kyle smiled, sharp and satisfied. The convergence withdraws its judgment, acknowledges that you used your power to protect rather than destroy, offers formal recognition of the Moonborn bloodline as sovereign, not subject to pack authority. The words should have felt like victory, like vindication. Instead, they just felt like the beginning. The first step in a much longer journey toward building a world where power and compassion could coexist. Tell them I accept. Arya looked at the destroyed ritual site, at the broken stones and dissipated magic. But tell them this too, I won't be the last Moonborn. I'm going to find the others, the ones hiding, the ones afraid, and I'm going to teach them what I learned. How to be strong without being cruel. How to use power to protect instead of dominate. She turned to face Kale fully, saw the understanding in his ancient eyes. I'm going to build what should have existed all along, a pack for wolves who don't fit into pack structures, a sanctuary for power that refuses to be caged, a place where Moonborn can exist without fear. That's dangerous, but Kale was smiling. The kind of dangerous that changes worlds. Good. Arya felt her wolf settle, content for the first time since her awakening. The world needs changing, and I'm just getting started. The silver fire pulsed one more time, then faded, leaving her standing in the clearing, powerful, purposeful, and finally completely free. The villain had been revealed, but not destroyed, because destroying Margaret wouldn't solve the problem, wouldn't change the fear that drove wolves to try to eliminate what they couldn't control. That would take something harder than destruction. That would take building something better, something worth believing in, something that proved power could be trusted when it was wielded by wolves who understood responsibility. And Arya Blackwood, child of the flame, Moonborn avatar, was ready to do exactly that. The story was far from over, but for the first time since that blizzard, since the rejection, since everything that had broken her down, she knew how it would end, not with her death, not with suppression or binding or being made small, but with transformation of herself, of the shifter world, of everything wolves thought they knew about power and hierarchy and what it meant to be strong. The convergence had withdrawn its judgment. Now it was time to show them what they'd really unleashed by letting the last Moonborn live. Time to burn away the old world and build something better from the ashes. And if that made her dangerous, well, some things were worth the risk. Chapter 9. Emotional Cliffhanger and CTA. The journey back to the amphitheater was nothing like the desperate race to the ritual site. Arya walked slowly, deliberately, feeling every step in bones that had channeled more power than any body should be able to contain. Theron moved beside her, still recovering, still processing what he'd witnessed. And Kale flanked her other side, silent but present, a guardian who'd seen too many Moonborn fall to ever take their survival for granted again. The forest felt different now, quieter, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what came next. Or maybe that was just Arya, her senses still heightened from the moon's touch, still perceiving the world through layers of magic most wolves would never see. She could feel them ahead, the assembled convergence, their emotions a tangled mess of fear and awe and reluctant respect. Could feel the ley lines beneath her feet, no longer destabilized, settling back into their natural patterns. Could feel the other Moonborn, those dozen scattered wolves whose genetics she'd sensed during the awakening, responding to what she'd done, some with hope, some with terror, all of them feeling for the first time in their lives that they might not have to hide forever. What are you going to tell them? Theron's voice was quiet, meant only for her. The convergence. They'll have questions, demands. They'll want to know what you plan to do with the power you just proved you can wield. The truth. She didn't look at him, kept her eyes on the path ahead, that I'm going to find the others, build something new, give Moonborn a choice they've never had before, to live openly, without fear, without having to suppress what they are to survive. That's going to terrify them. Good. Now she did glance at him, saw the concern in his eyes. Let them be terrified. Let them understand that the world is changing, whether they're comfortable with it or not. Let them choose whether to adapt or be left behind. You sound like a revolutionary. Maybe I am. The words settled over her like a mantle she was only beginning to understand how to wear. Maybe that's what the prophecy meant, not that I'd conquer the packs, but that I'd give wolves who don't fit into pack structures a different path, a different way to exist. Kale made a sound that might have been approval. Lyssa would have liked you, would have loved what you're becoming. The comparison should have made her uncomfortable. She still wasn't Lyssa, would never be Lyssa. But coming from Kale, it felt less like pressure to fill a dead wolf's shoes and more like acknowledgement that she was carving her own path to the same destination. Tell me about her. Arya surprised herself with the request. Not the legend, the real wolf. What was she like before the packs decided she was too dangerous to live? Kyle was quiet for several steps, his expression distant with memory. She was fierce, absolutely uncompromising when it came to protecting the vulnerable, but she was also kind in ways that made you ache, because you knew the world would eventually punish her for that kindness. She believed, truly believed, that power was meant to serve. That strength existed to protect the weak, not to dominate them, and she built that belief into everything she did. He paused, seeming to gather himself. She also had a temper that could scorch earth. When she was angry, truly angry, you could feel it in your bones, feel the moon itself respond to her fury. The packs feared that more than anything, a Moonborn who could channel rage into power without losing herself to it, who could burn without being consumed. Is that what killed her? The rage? No. Theron's voice was rough. What killed her was trusting that the packs would honor their word. She agreed to meet with them, to discuss terms for coexistence. They promised safe passage, neutral ground, a genuine attempt at finding common ground, and they lied. The pain in his voice was visceral, unhealed despite 7 decades of trying. They ambushed her, brought weapons designed specifically to kill Moonborn. And when she fought back, when she defended herself with the same power they'd claimed to fear, they used that as justification, called her a rabid threat, declared her too dangerous to be allowed to live. He stopped walking, his hands clenched into fists. I felt her die, through our bond, felt the moment her heart stopped beating, and I was 3 miles away fighting through enforcers who'd been positioned specifically to delay me, to make sure I arrived too late to save her. The confession hung in the air, raw and devastating. Arya reached out slowly, her hand finding his arm, not comforting, just present, acknowledging the loss without trying to minimize it. I won't make the same mistake. Her voice was quiet but firm. I won't trust their promises without verification. Won't walk into situations where I'm vulnerable. Won't let kindness make me stupid about the reality of what I'm facing. But you'll still try. Theron looked at her, and she saw the conflict in his eyes. Still try to build bridges. Still try to prove that Moonborn can coexist with Pax. Still risk yourself on the hope that this time things can be different. Yes, simple, absolute. Because the alternative is living in fear, hiding, becoming exactly what they claim we are, isolated, dangerous, unable to integrate. I won't do that, won't let their fear dictate my choices. Even if it gets you killed. Even then. She held his gaze, because some things are worth dying for, and proving that power can be wielded responsibly, that Moonborn can be trusted, that a different world is possible, that's worth the risk. Something shifted in Theron's expression. The fear was still there. The trauma of losing Lissa still haunting him, but underneath it, she saw something that looked like hope, fragile, tentative, but real. Then I'm with you. The words came out like a vow. Not because I think it's safe, not because I'm not terrified of watching you die the way I watched her die, but because you're right. Because the world needs changing, and because I'm tired of letting fear make me small. Cale cleared his throat, breaking the moment. We're almost there. You should know, the convergence is divided. Some alphas are calling you a hero. Others are saying you're more dangerous than ever, that you just proved you can break ancient magic at will. And a few... He paused, his expression grim. A few are questioning why Margaret isn't dead, saying you showed weakness by sparing her. Let them question. Arya started walking again, feeling the amphitheater's presence ahead. Killing her would have been easy, would have felt good even after what she tried to do. But it wouldn't have solved anything, wouldn't have changed the fear that drove her, wouldn't have proven that Moonborn can choose mercy even when we have the power to choose destruction. They crested the final ridge, and the amphitheater came into view. The assembled wolves were still there, hundreds of them, all turned toward the path where Arya would emerge. She could feel their attention like a physical weight, could sense the fear and awe and desperate need to understand what she'd become. Last chance to run. Coyle's voice was light, but there was genuine concern underneath. You walk down there, you commit to this path. Commit to being what they need you to be, even when it costs you. No going back to being just Arya. You'll be the Moonborn, the child of the flame, the wolf who broke a century of suppression magic. That's who you'll be for the rest of your life. Was that what she wanted? To be defined by power and prophecy? To have every action scrutinized, every decision weighted with the expectations of wolves who saw her as either savior or threat? No, not entirely. Part of her still longed for the simplicity of pack life, for belonging without condition, for being loved for who she was instead of what she represented. But that wasn't an option anymore, had never really been an option, even before her power awakened. She'd always been different, always been too much or not enough, depending on who was judging. At least now, she got to decide what too much meant, got to define herself instead of letting others define her. No going back, she repeated quietly. Only forward, only becoming everything they fear and everything they need, and hoping I'm strong enough to be both. She started down the path toward the amphitheater, toward the hundreds of eyes watching her approach, toward a future that was terrifying and uncertain and completely hers to shape. The assembled wolves parted as she entered, creating a corridor that led to the center where the ruined binding circle still smoldered with residual magic. She walked that corridor with her head high, her power controlled but present, letting every wolf there see exactly what she was. Elder Corrin stepped forward, his ancient eyes assessing. You stopped the ritual, saved the Alpha King, prevented a catastrophe that would have crippled a third of our population. His voice carried across the silent amphitheater. The Convergence acknowledges this service, withdraws its judgment against you, and offers formal recognition that the Moonborn bloodline will not be subject to pack authority or suppression. It should have felt like victory, like everything she'd fought for. Instead, it felt conditional, temporary, recognition offered because she'd proven useful, not because they'd fundamentally changed their minds about what she represented. I accept the Convergence's recognition, Arya said, her voice steady, but I want to be clear about what it means. I'm not accepting sovereignty for just myself. I'm accepting it for every wolf who carries Moonborn genetics, every wolf who's been hiding, suppressing their power, living in fear that someone will discover what they are and eliminate them. They deserve the right to exist without persecution, without having to prove they're safe before they're allowed to breathe. A murmur went through the crowd, some approving, some resistant. The scarred female alpha from earlier stepped forward. And if one of these Moonborn you're protecting becomes dangerous, loses control, threatens pack territories, then I handle it. Arya met her gaze unflinchingly, the same way packs handle dangerous members, through intervention, through teaching, and yes, if absolutely necessary, through force. But the key difference is that Moonborn will police ourselves. We won't submit to pack authority to determine what dangerous means or what control looks like. We'll set our own standards, build our own structures, and we'll hold ourselves accountable to those standards. That's asking us to trust you completely. The Blood Moon Alpha's voice was skeptical, to accept that you'll handle threats before they become catastrophic, to believe that Moonborn won't abuse the sovereignty you're demanding. No more than I'm trusting you. Arya swept her gaze across the assembly, trusting that you won't use the first mistake any Moonborn makes as justification to declare us all threats, trusting that you'll honor the sovereignty you're offering instead of looking for loopholes to undermine it, trusting that you actually want coexistence instead of just containment with a prettier name. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken doubts on both sides. Finally, Corrin spoke again. The Convergence will honor its commitment. Moonborn will have sovereignty. But understand this, young one, the moment that sovereignty is abused, the moment a Moonborn threatens pack territories without just cause, this recognition can be revoked. We're offering trust, not blind acceptance. That's fair. More than fair, really, considering where they'd started. And I'll make you the same promise. As long as packs honor Moonborn sovereignty, as long as you don't hunt us or try to suppress us, I'll use every bit of my power to ensure we coexist peacefully. But the moment any pack breaks that agreement, she let silver fire flicker in her eyes just for a moment. I'll show you exactly why your ancestors feared us enough to try genocide. The threat hung in the air, balanced by the promise. Violence if violated, peace if honored. It was the best she could offer. The best any of them could offer, really, in a world still learning to trust after centuries of conflict. Then we have an accord. Corin raised his hand in formal acknowledgement. "Let it be witnessed by this convergence. The Moonborn bloodline is recognized as sovereign. No pack will hunt them. No council will judge them. No wolf will be persecuted for carrying their genetics. In exchange, the Moonborn will police themselves and work toward peaceful coexistence with pack territories." A murmur of agreement went through the assembly. Not unanimous, but enough. Enough to make it official. Enough to make it real. Arya felt something in her chest ease. Not the vigilance. She'd never stopped being alert for betrayal, but the constant grinding fear that she'd be hunted forever. That was gone, replaced by something that felt almost like hope. She turned to leave, to find somewhere quiet to process everything that had happened, when a voice called out from the crowd. "Wait!" Marcus stepped forward, his expression conflicted. Her former alpha, the wolf who'd rejected her and set all of this in motion. "I need to..." He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. "I need to apologize for how I handled your awakening, for the rejection, for not being strong enough to stand with you when your power manifested. I was afraid, and that fear made me cruel, made me throw away something, someone valuable, because I was too weak to handle what you were becoming." The apology was genuine. She could feel that much, could sense the regret, the shame, the recognition that he'd made a mistake. But it didn't change anything, didn't undo the months of suffering, didn't heal the damage his rejection had caused. "I accept your apology," she said quietly, "but I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because what you did, casting me out, leaving that bond to rot inside me, making me feel like being powerful was the same as being broken. That's not something that heals with words. That's going to take time and distance, and you proving through actions that you actually understand why what you did was wrong." He flinched but nodded. "That's fair, more than fair. I just wanted you to know I see you now, see what you've become, and I'm in awe and deeply ashamed that I wasn't brave enough to see it earlier." "Good." She held his gaze one more time, then turned away. "Use that shame. Let it make you better. Let it make you the kind of alpha who doesn't throw away pack members the moment they become inconvenient. Maybe then, someday, we can have a different conversation." She walked away from him, from the amphitheater, from the hundreds of wolves still watching her every move. Theron fell into step beside her, his presence solid and warm. "Where are you going?" "I don't know yet." She looked up at the sky where the moon was rising. Normal now, not blood red, just silver and steady. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can think. Somewhere I can start planning how to find the other Moonborn and build what I promised. You don't have to do it alone." His hand found hers, the touch gentle but firm. "I meant what I said. I'm with you, for however long you'll have me." She squeezed his hand, felt their connection pulse with possibility. "We're still not okay," she reminded him. "Still have work to do, trust to rebuild, conversations to have." "I know." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "But we can work toward, okay, together, if you're willing." Was she willing? To trust a wolf who'd hesitated when she needed certainty? To build something with someone who carried the trauma of losing another Moonborn? The smart answer was probably no. The safe answer was definitely no. But Arya was done being smart and safe. "I'm willing," she said softly. "To try. To fail. To try again. To see if what we have can be built into something real instead of just trauma and prophecy binding us together." His smile was small but genuine. "That's all I'm asking for. A chance. Time. The opportunity to prove I can be what you need instead of what I fear." They walked in silence for a while, leaving the amphitheater behind, leaving the convergence to process what had happened. And as they walked, Arya felt something settle in her chest. Not peace, There was too much ahead, too many challenges, too much work to be done for peace, but purpose, direction, understanding of who she was and what she was meant to do. She was Moonborn, child of the flame, the wolf who'd broken a century of suppression magic and forced the packs to acknowledge that power could exist outside their control. She was also Arya Blackwood, rejected, wounded, still healing from betrayals that had nearly destroyed her. Both things were true. Both things would shape what came next. But for the first time since that blizzard, since the moment Marcus had looked at her with fear and disgust, she didn't see those contradictions as weaknesses. She saw them as strength, as proof that she could be powerful without losing her humanity, could be fierce without being cruel, could change the world without becoming a monster. The moon shone overhead, and she felt its approval like a warmth in her chest. She'd done it. Survived the convergence, stopped the ritual, proven that Moonborn could be trusted with power. But this was just the beginning. Now came the harder part. Building something lasting, finding the others, teaching them what she'd learned. Creating a world where wolves like her could exist without fear. Creating a legacy that would outlive her, whatever form that legacy took. The path ahead was long, uncertain, filled with wolves who would challenge her, test her, try to prove that the Convergence's recognition was a mistake. But she wasn't walking it alone anymore. She had Theron, complicated and wounded and trying to be better. She had Kyle, ancient and patient and carrying his own grief. She had the knowledge that somewhere out there, a dozen other Moonborn were feeling hope for the first time in their lives. She had power. She had purpose. She had the moon's blessing and the land's recognition. And she had herself. Finally, completely, unapologetically herself. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. If this story burned something awake in you, if you saw yourself in Arya's journey from rejection to power, from being told you're too much to claiming that muchness as strength, then you know this isn't just fiction. This is a mirror, a battle cry, a promise that the wolves who were cast out, who were told to be smaller, who were hunted for being powerful, we survive. We thrive. We become exactly what they feared, and we use that power to protect instead of destroy. Share this story, not because I'm asking, but because there's someone in your life who needs it. Someone who was told they were too much and believed it. Someone who's hiding their power because the world punished them for showing it. Someone who needs to know their pack exists, even if they haven't found us yet. Share this with the one person who was told they were too much and became more. Send them this story. Tell them you see them. Tell them they're not alone. Tell them there's a community of wolves who refuse to be small, and we're building something worth being part of. And if you're that person, if you're the one who needed this story, who saw yourself in Arya's struggle and her triumph, welcome home. Subscribe to Kismet Romance Collection. This is where we gather, where stories about powerful women who refuse to apologize become movements instead of just entertainment, where being too much is celebrated instead of condemned, where you can find yourself reflected in characters who survive, who thrive, who burn brighter instead of dimming their light. This is your pack. This is your sanctuary. This is where you belong. Arya's story isn't over. The Moonborn are just beginning to rise. And the next chapter, the next story, the next wolf who refuses to be caged, they're all waiting. But only if you're here to witness it. Subscribe, share, comment with Moonborn if you claim this story as yours, if you refuse to be small, if you're ready to build the world Arya is creating, one where power and compassion coexist, where strength protects instead of dominates, where being exactly who you are is enough. The moon is rising, the pack is gathering, and your place is waiting. Will you claim it? Kismet Romance Collection. where powerful women become unstoppable forces, where being too much is exactly enough, where your story, the real one, the one where you survive and thrive and refuse to be diminished, finally gets told. Subscribe now. The next chapter begins soon, and you won't want to miss what happens when the Moonborn truly awaken. Chapter 10, Ending Tease. This isn't over 3 days after the convergence. Arya stood at the edge of the northern sanctuary, looking out over valleys that stretched toward territories she'd never explored. Somewhere out there, the other Moonborn waited, hiding, afraid, not yet ready to believe that the world had changed enough to make survival possible. She'd find them eventually. One by one, she'd locate every wolf carrying the bloodline and offer them what she'd fought for: choice. The choice to hide or emerge, the choice to suppress or embrace, the choice to be small or claim their full power. But that was tomorrow's work. Today, she was still recovering, still integrating the moon's power into a body that had been pushed past every limit, still learning to exist in skin that felt simultaneously too large and too small for what she'd become. "You're restless." Theron's voice came from behind her, familiar now in ways that both comforted and complicated. "I can feel it through our connection, the need to move, to act, to start building what you promised." "I can't help it." She didn't turn, kept her eyes on the horizon. "Every moment I'm standing still is a moment those other Moonborn are suffering, hiding, living in fear of being discovered and destroyed. I know what that fear feels like, and knowing I could end it if I just moved fast enough, found them quick enough. You can't save everyone at once." He moved beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You learned that lesson the hard way, trying to prove yourself to the convergence, trying to stop the ritual, trying to be everything to everyone. It nearly killed you, multiple times. I survived, barely." His hand found hers, the touch gentle but insistent. "And you'll survive the next challenge too, and the one after that. But survival isn't the same as living, Arya. At some point, you need to let yourself rest. Let yourself be something other than the Moonborn savior carrying the weight of an entire bloodline." She knew he was right, could feel the exhaustion in her bones, the way her power flickered instead of flowing smoothly. The moon had given her strength, yes, but using that strength came with a cost she was only beginning to understand. "I don't know how to rest." The admission came out quieter than intended. "Every time I close my eyes, I see them. The ones I haven't found yet, the ones who are suffering while I'm standing here doing nothing. How do I rest knowing that?" "By trusting that they've survived this long, they can survive a few more days while you recover." Theron turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders, his expression serious. "By understanding that you're no good to anyone if you burn yourself out before you've even started the real work, by accepting that being powerful doesn't mean being invincible." The words made sense. She just didn't know how to listen to them. A tremor ran through the ground beneath their feet, small, barely noticeable, but Arya's heightened senses caught it, and judging by Theron's expression, so did his. "Did you feel that?" She looked down, watching for another tremor that didn't come. "Earthquake?" Theron's voice was uncertain. "This region isn't prone to them, but it's not impossible." "That wasn't an earthquake." Kale emerged from the sanctuary's entrance, his face grave. "That was a power surge. Old magic. Very old. Coming from—" He stopped, tilted his head as if listening to something only he could hear. "From the west. Deep west. Beyond pack territories. Beyond anywhere modern shifters venture." "What's out there?" Arya's wolf was pressing close to the surface, alert, sensing danger even if her human mind couldn't identify it yet. "Nothing that should still be active." Kale moved to the valley's edge, staring west with an intensity that made Arya's skin prickle. The old places, the sites where the first shifters were changed, where the magic that created our species originated. They were sealed centuries ago, made dormant. Nothing should be able to wake them. But something just did. Theron's voice was tight with concern. Another tremor, stronger this time, and with it, a pulse of power that made Arya's breath catch. It felt wrong, not evil exactly, but alien. Magic that operated on different rules than anything she'd encountered. What happens if those sights wake up? She looked between Kyle and Theron, saw the concern in both their faces. Nothing good. Kale's voice was flat. The magic that created shifters was unstable. Powerful, yes, but unpredictable. The first generations dealt with mutations, with wolves who couldn't control their shifts, with power that consumed instead of empowered. It took centuries to breed that instability out, to create the relatively stable shifter population we have now. If that original magic becomes active again, it could destabilize everything. Theron finished the thought. Could create new shifters with powers we don't understand. Could mutate existing wolves. Could unravel centuries of carefully maintained balance. Arya felt cold despite the warm air. Someone's doing this deliberately. Someone's waking the old sights. Yes. Kale's expression was grim. The question is why? What could anyone possibly gain from destabilizing the entire shifter species? The answer came on the next tremor, carried on a pulse of power that felt distinctly familiar. Moonborn magic. But wrong. Twisted. Like someone had taken lunar power and corrupted it into something it was never meant to be. No. Arya's voice was barely a whisper. That's not possible. The ritual was destroyed. Margaret was stripped of resources. There's no way. Margaret was a tool. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the valley with unnatural clarity. Not speaking, broadcasting, using magic to project words directly into their minds. A useful idiot who thought she was leading when she was merely following. The ritual was never the goal. It was a distraction, a way to draw out the newly awakened Moonborn and assess her capabilities. The voice was female, ancient, carrying harmonics that made Arya's wolf whimper in recognition and fear. "Who are you?" Theron demanded, his power rising in response to the threat. "Show yourself if you're brave enough to make accusations." Laughter echoed through the valley, cold and amused. Brave? Child? I was old when your great-grandparents were learning to shift. I've watched empires rise and fall. I've seen species emerge and go extinct. Bravery is irrelevant. Only power matters. Only survival. Answer his question. Arya's voice was steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. "Who are you? What do you want?" "What I want is what I've always wanted. Evolution. Progress. The advancement of our species beyond the limitations your precious packs have imposed. The Moonborn bloodline was meant to be the next step, stronger, faster, more connected to the source of our power, but the packs hunted them down, eliminated them, set our species back centuries because they were afraid of change." Another tremor, and this time Arya saw it. Cracks forming in the valley floor, glowing with the same twisted lunar magic she'd felt in the power surge. "You're trying to force evolution." Kale's voice carried horror and understanding. "Trying to recreate the conditions that created shifters in the first place. You're going to mutate every wolf within range of those sites. Not mutate, uplift. Give them what they should have had all along. The choice to become more than pack politics and territorial squabbles. The choice to evolve or die trying." The voice paused, and when it continued, there was satisfaction in every syllable. "And you, little Moonborn, proved it could be done. Proved that the bloodline could be awakened. that the old power could be channeled without destroying the vessel. You showed me that my theories were correct, that evolution is possible. I didn't show you anything. Arya's hands clenched into fists, silver fire kindling beneath her skin. I survived. I adapted. I learned control. That's not evolution. That's just not dying. Semantics. The point is, you demonstrated that modern wolves can handle the old power, which means my experiment can proceed. The sights are waking. The magic is spreading. And soon every wolf within 1,000 miles will have to choose, evolve into something stronger, or be consumed by power they can't contain. You're talking about genocide. Theron's voice was low, dangerous. Most wolves can't handle that kind of power surge. They'll burn out, die. You'll kill thousands in the name of forcing a few dozen to evolve. Acceptable losses. The voice was utterly unconcerned. The weak die. The strong survive and become stronger. That's how nature works. That's how it's always worked. I'm simply accelerating the process. You're insane. Arya felt her power rising in response to the threat, felt the moon itself stirring in recognition of the corruption being inflicted on its magic. The convergence will stop you. Every pack, working together. The convergence can barely agree on what to have for lunch, let alone how to counter magic they don't understand. More laughter, edged with contempt. No, little Moonborn. If anyone's going to stop me, it'll be you. You and whatever allies you can gather. You and the power you're only beginning to understand. You and the choice you'll have to make. Protect the species as it is, or let it evolve into what it could become. The presence began to fade, the projection ending. But before it disappeared entirely, the voice spoke one more time. You think you're the only Moonborn who survived? You think you're special because the blood moon chose you? A pause, heavy with implication. You're not. She is not the only one. There are others, older, stronger, less burdened by morality and mercy. And when we meet, when you finally understand what true Moonborn power looks like, you'll have to decide. Will you join us in evolution, or will you die defending a species that cast you out? Then silence. Complete, oppressive silence. The cracks in the valley floor stopped glowing. The tremors ceased. But the damage was done. The threat was real. And somewhere to the west, ancient sites were waking, preparing to flood the shifter world with magic it wasn't equipped to handle. Arya stood frozen, her mind racing through implications she didn't want to face. There were other Moonborn, not hidden wolves waiting to be found and protected, but active players. Wolves who'd survived the purges and had decades, maybe centuries, to grow their power. Wolves who'd apparently decided that evolution through forced mutation was an acceptable solution to pack suppression. And they knew about her, had been watching, had used Margaret's ritual as a way to assess what she was capable of, had been planning this for longer than she'd been alive. This changes everything. Theron's voice was quiet, but she could hear the steel underneath. We need to alert the convergence. Mobilize every pack. Find these sites before they fully activate. And then what? Kale's expression was bleak. Fight Moonborn who've had centuries to master their power, whose entire goal is to force evolution through chaos. We barely survived stopping one ritual. You're talking about countering multiple sites simultaneously, each one potentially defended by wolves who make Arya look like a novice. So what do you suggest? Theron rounded on him. We let them proceed. Let them kill thousands in the name of evolution. Let them destabilize everything we've built. I'm suggesting we think before we act, plan before we charge into battle. Understand what we're facing before we commit to a course of action that might make things worse. Kyle looked at Arya, his ancient eyes searching. This is bigger than you now, bigger than the Moonborn sovereignty you fought for. This is about the survival of the species, and the choice you make next, whether to stand with the packs against other Moonborn or try to find some third path, that's going to define everything that comes after. The weight of that settled over Arya like a physical thing. She'd fought so hard to earn recognition, to prove Moonborn could coexist with packs, to build something that allowed wolves like her to exist without fear. And now she was being asked to fight other Moonborn, to potentially kill wolves carrying the same bloodline she'd sworn to protect. To choose between the species as it existed and the evolution someone else had decided was necessary. There was no good choice, no path that didn't involve betrayal of someone, somewhere. No way to win without becoming exactly what she'd sworn not to be. The ground trembled one more time, gentler now, almost like a reminder. The sights were waking. The countdown had begun, and somewhere out there, other Moonborn were waiting to see what she'd do, whether she'd stand with them or against them, whether she'd embrace evolution or fight to preserve what existed. Arya looked at Theron, saw the fear and determination in his eyes, looked at Kyle, saw the ancient wisdom and deep concern, looked out at the valley that had become her sanctuary, knowing it might soon become a battlefield. And she made the only choice she could make with the information she had. We gather intelligence. Her voice was steady, decisive. We find these sites. We assess the threat. We locate these other Moonborn and figure out who they are, what they really want, what they're actually planning. And then she paused, feeling the weight of leadership settling onto shoulders that had only recently learned to carry their own power. Then we decide. Together. Not just me, not just Theron, every wolf with skin in this game. We decide whether to fight, to negotiate, to find some compromise that doesn't involve genocide or forced evolution. That could take time we don't have. Theron's voice was tight with urgency. Then we move fast, but we move smart. Arya turned to face him fully. Charging in blind gets us killed, gets everyone killed. I can't make decisions this big without understanding what I'm deciding, without knowing all the options, without being sure I'm choosing the right path instead of just the path that feels most heroic in the moment. She could see him struggling with that, could see the part of him that wanted immediate action warring with the part that recognized she was right. Finally, he nodded. Then we gather intelligence. But Arya, if these sites activate before we're ready, if the forced evolution starts before we have a plan, then we improvise, we adapt, we survive. She smiled, the expression carrying more confidence than she felt. We've gotten pretty good at that, haven't we? The tremors had stopped. The voice was gone, but the threat remained. Hovering on the horizon like a storm everyone could see, building but no one knew how to prevent. Arya looked out at the valleys stretching west, toward the ancient sites, toward the other Moonborn, toward a confrontation that would define not just her future, but the future of every shifter alive. The story she'd thought was ending, rejection to recognition, powerless to powerful, cast out to claimed, that was just prologue. The real story was about to begin, and this time, survival wouldn't be enough. This time, she'd have to be strategic, diplomatic, willing to make impossible choices. This time, she'd have to decide not just who she was, but what she stood for, what she was willing to fight for, what she was willing to sacrifice. The moon hung overhead, watching, waiting to see what its chosen daughter would do when tested beyond anything she'd faced before. Arya took a deep breath, feeling her power settle in her bones, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility. "This isn't over," she said quietly to Theron, to Kale, to herself. "This is just beginning. And whatever comes next, whoever these other Moonborn are, whatever they're planning, we face it together, not as packs and Moonborn, not as enemies forced into temporary alliance, but as wolves who understand that the only way any of us survive is if all of us survive." It sounded good. idealistic, maybe even naive, but it was also true. And truth, she'd learned, had its own kind of power. The valley trembled one final time, almost like acknowledgement, then went still. The countdown had begun, and Arya Blackwood, child of the flame, Moonborn avatar, newly recognized sovereign of a bloodline that refused to die, stood at the edge of everything and prepared to either save her species or watch it evolve into something unrecognizable. Only time would tell which. Only her choices would determine the outcome. And somewhere in the west, another Moonborn was watching, waiting, planning, smiling. The ground just trembled. The voice just spoke. And everything you thought you knew about this story just changed. This isn't a happy ending. This is a cliffhanger, a promise, a threat. Because Arya's fight for recognition? That was the easy part. Now comes the real test. Other Moonborn who've survived in shadows, ancient sites waking with corrupted magic, a choice between preserving what exists or allowing forced evolution that could kill thousands. Now comes the impossible decision, and you get to choose what happens next. This is your story now, your movement, your pack. Comment Part 2. If you need to know what happens when Arya faces other Moonborn, when she has to choose between her bloodline and the species, when she discovers that being powerful isn't enough, you have to be right. Comment End It if you think this should be her final stand. If you believe some stories are perfect in their incompleteness. If you want Arya's legacy to be the question, not the answer. Your voice matters. Your choice shapes what comes next. Because this isn't just my story anymore. It's ours. And we decide together whether the Moonborn rise or fall, whether evolution happens or gets prevented, whether Arya becomes the leader she's meant to be or dies trying. The sights are waking. The countdown has begun, and your comment determines whether we face what's coming or leave it as a mystery. Choose now, Part 2, or end it. The future of the Moonborn is in your hands. Kismet Romance Collection, where your voice shapes the story, where cliffhangers become movements, where the pack decides together what comes next. Comment now, before the next tremor hits, before the choice is made for you. The Moonborn are waiting, and so am I.